All right, everybody. Thank y'all for tuning in to this virtual CWD meeting. This is the second one of this kind that we've done this year, and we appreciate everybody tuning in and being a part. If you've got questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will address those as we can. But first, I want to introduce myself. I'm Jason Harmon, the Communications Manager for TWRA. Also host Tennessee's Wildcast, and we're in Studio B today hosting this virtual meeting. All our other guys and gals are on Zoom today. We're playing it extra safe and social distancing and all that fun stuff. So those guys are on Zoom today, and we're going to let them introduce themselves before we get started, and then we will jump right into some of the questions that have come in beforehand and things that we want to make sure you guys know about. So bear with us here. We're going to make sure we're in speaker mode for everybody. And Jeremy, if you don't mind, kick us off, introduce yourself, and then we'll go across the screen there, and then we'll get started.
Sure. Thank you, Jason. My name is Jeremy Dennison, and I work as the CWD Field Coordinator over in West Tennessee out of the Region 1 office.
Stephanie?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Steph Durno-Carnes. I'm a wildlife biologist here in Nashville, working on CWD. Before I came to Tennessee, I worked in Colorado for 20 years, and I've been working with CWD pretty much that whole time in one way or another. So I'm really happy to be a new transplant and happy to be working with TWRA.
We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Dan?
I'm Dan Grove. Serve as a wildlife veterinarian for TWRA. My position is actually through the University of Tennessee Extension. I'm a 100% UT employee, and so my position is a cost share position. So for UT, I serve as the wildlife health specialist for the state through Extension.
Great. Well, I appreciate you guys being on today and being available. And we're going to be open and transparent today and talk with the public, and I appreciate you guys doing that. To get started, we're going to start with the first question. Is TWRA offering free testing this season? Dan, can you take that one and let everybody know what options they have?
Yep. Testing for the foreseeable future will be free for anybody that wants it. If you're hunting within the affected counties in Southwest Tennessee, we're working with processors and taxidermists. That list is online, as well as we have a bunch of freezer drop-off points that are available for people that just want to drop off that are processing their own deer or doing their own taxidermy. There's locations all throughout the 11 counties in that area. Throughout the rest of the state, we will be taking samples. There are freezer locations, one per region approximately. But on opener of muzzleloader and rifle seasons in all of the units, all of the areas outside of Region 1, there will be check stations at various taxidermists and processors where we'll be doing the bulk of our surveillance this year. So that's a good way to get your animals sampled. Or, if you live really far away from any of those kind of places, feel free to get in touch with your regional office and try and make arrangements with them to get your deer sampled.
Okay, Dan, thank you. I just realized I left Jeremy out. We're supposed to start with the PowerPoint. Jeremy had a little presentation, and I jumped the gun there. So, Dan, great information. Thank you for answering that. That's our first question for today. But, Jeremy, I need you to take it away on the presentation. My bad.
That's all right. Thank you, Jason. Let me get her up here. See that okay, Jason?
Yeah, looks good on our end.
All right, so thanks, Jason, for coming back to me there. Appreciate that.
My bad.
Like I said, my name is Jeremy Dennison, and what I want to do is give a very brief update to chronic waste and disease management in Tennessee. To start off, we want to just reiterate our goals. One is to prevent the spread of the disease into new areas where it doesn't currently exist. It's kind of the number one goal. Number two, we want to try to reduce prevalence where possible. To meet those goals, TWRA relies on a number of partnerships, but we realize our greatest allies are hunters and landowners. And so although the harvest decreased last year in unit CWD, hunters did provide us a lot of samples. So we got a lot of information over the season. And this map kind of summarizes all the positive locations since we began this. So we have a good understanding of where CWD exists on the landscape, and a pretty good idea of the prevalence where it does exist. Again, you see the locations of all those positives in Tennessee and Mississippi, and the area in Tennessee covers about 4,500 square miles. So it covers a pretty good area down in Southwest Tennessee. To meet our goals, we need to rely on the transport and feeding restrictions, and we need to increase the deer harvest. So what you see here is a map. It's kind of the current state, the positive and high risk counties that make up unit CWD. Of course, the positive counties are in red, high risk are in that orange color. And again, those counties are considered high risk because a positive CWD positive deer was located within 10 miles of the county line. So we treat those counties from a management perspective as part of the CWD unit. So we do have two higher prevalence counties, which of course are Fayette and Hardeman, where the prevalence is higher than the others. And the other counties there in the unit, the other positive counties are all, they do have the disease. We have documented it there, but the prevalence rates are all less than 1%. And so included 3 new counties, which were Gibson, Crockett, and Lauderdale, 2 unit CWD this year. And we made some regulation changes. And those are summarized in this slide. So basically guns are allowed all season except for during the archery only segments. There are no mandatory check station requirements. We feel like we have a lot of avenues to collect samples, and we can provide that service to hunters through those means without having to make the extra ask of bring your deer to a physical check station. And then the last thing is we remove the limit on the earn-a-buck, where you submit 2 antlerless deer for testing and receive 1 earned buck. The previous limit was 2, and that's now unlimited. And that's all I've got as far as an update.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. I apologize once again for skipping over you there. All right, well, we know now the free testing sites and what we're offering as far as that goes. Thank you, Dan, for that. Let's move on to the next question. Where can I submit my deer for sampling? Jeremy, you want to take that one?
Sure, I'll be glad to. And Dan touched on that earlier, but you can find the entire list on the CWD section of our website, our agency website. Basically, we're working with most processors and taxidermists in the unit CWD counties, as well as we have about 34 sample drop-off containers that folks can feel free to use. And I'd encourage folks to use those. All
right. The next question, Stephanie, if you don't mind taking this one, is it safe to keep hunting, and how can I stay safe when I harvest or process my deer?
So the Centers for Disease Control do recommend that hunters do not consume meat from deer that test positive for chronic wasting disease, but you can still safely hunt, harvest, and eat deer from the CWD affected area. You need to use gloves when you get your deer, and make sure you get your animal tested for CWD. Like Dr. Grove and Jeremy said, testing is free and readily available. So you can definitely still keep hunting, and it is safe to do so.
Awesome. And we want to encourage folks to harvest their limit. Get out there and have fun and harvest your limit. The next question, I know we touched on this in the last live session, but what will turnaround times be for hunters once they've harvested deer and had it tested? Has that time changed? I know I forget exactly what we told them last time, what the turnaround time was, but Dan, can you elaborate on that turnaround time for testing?
Yeah, at the present time, when we're kind of in a little bit of a slower portion of the year in terms of the number of hunters that are out in the field, you're looking at about a week turnaround time. We're hoping to keep it within 7 to 10 days, but be aware that there are going to be busier times of the year whenever there's a lot of samples being processed through the system. We're currently using Colorado State University, and we've just recently transitioned to a portion of our samples over to Cord Lab, which is here in the state of Tennessee. That's the Department of Agriculture's Veterinary Services Laboratory here in the Nashville area. And so we're going to be transitioning over to that. And we're hoping that the combination of things that we're doing this year will help keep that down to about 7 to 10 days, but be aware that that might actually be a little bit longer than that as we get further into the season, whenever there's more people out hunting and more samples being processed into the system. There's just certain aspects of things that timing wise, that you do everything you can, but there's certain portions of the sampling scheme that you just can't cut down time on. So.
All right.
Can I just jump in real quick and add one thing?
Sure, you certainly can.
That's great. So the best way that a hunter can shorten their own notification time is to make sure that your correct email address is in your account at gooutdoorstennessee.com. Make sure all your information's up to date. That way we can get a hold of you. Thanks.
Perfect. Good information. Okay, Dan, this will come back to you. How can hunters help manage CWD inside and outside of the CWD affected area?
One of the first things is by abiding by the transport regulations that are in place and the carcass movement restrictions that we have in place. Additionally, we always encourage people we've made the hunting structure and the availability of being able to remove more animals much easier in the affected area. And that would, removing your daily limit if you possibly can on any given day, or harvesting as many animals as you can, would help a lot in the process. We do have a high deer density in our impacted areas, and we just need to kind of get that density down to help prevent the spread of the disease, as well as prevent the prevalence of the disease from growing. So we always encourage people to get out there and continue to hunt, as well as just be mindful of the way you dispose of your carcass and where you move it on the landscape. We don't want those pieces and parts from the impacted counties, from the positive counties, leaving those counties and going elsewhere. And that just helps prevent the man-assisted spread of the disease at that point in time.
You mentioned, or you touched on transporting. Jeremy, do you mind answering this one, kind of out of order, but can touch on the rules for transporting deer? And I know CWDintennessee.com is a great resource, and that information is there. But can you kind of touch on the map and what's legal and what can be transported where? I know it's maybe harder to explain it on camera, but it's a lot easier to look at that chart online. But can you touch on that?
Sure. And like you said, I'd encourage folks to visit the website and take a look at those maps and figures. But just to summarize, to maybe make it as simple as possible with the transport rules, we want to keep infectious material out of areas where it doesn't currently exist. And so where that's found most in deer is in the central nervous system. So that's the reason why we have the transport regulations regarding deboning your animal. But basically, to remove a deer from a positive county, you have to debone it, and you have to, if it's a buck, it has to have a clean skull plate. So you're leaving the infectious material behind. And the same goes for, you remove it from a county that's in unit CWD. If you're going outside, say you're going farther east in Tennessee, you have to meet those requirements. Now you can take deer from outside of Unit CWD the other way, and you don't have to meet those requirements. And those same requirements exist for taking deer out of state as well. Most states in the U.S. now have similar transportation regulations. So.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'll add one thing on that. If you are a hunter that's coming in from another state, be aware the regulations of the state you're coming from or going to go back to are the regulations you need to look at for transporting into that state, as well as our regulations that we have here. So like if you're from Mississippi and you're coming to Tennessee to hunt, be aware that, as Jeremy mentioned, Mississippi has their own set of regulations. And so they would be the ones, if you were to cross over into Mississippi from Tennessee, their rules are the ones that apply there too. So just be aware of that.
All right. You kind of touched on this, Dan, earlier, but the in-state testing facility, is it operational yet? And can you update us on that?
Yep. Yeah. As I mentioned before, Cord Lab here in the Nashville area, the Department of Agriculture's Veterinary Services Lab for the state is set up to do the ELISA testing for us at this point in time. And we are sending a portion of our samples to them to kind of slowly gear them up and get ready for the onslaught of what will be the bulk of our sampling season as we get into muzzleloader and rifle seasons this year.
All right. A big shout out to the processors and taxidermists that have opened up their doors and helping us with sampling and things like that. Jeremy, would you touch on who is accepting samples and helping us with that in the CWD affected area this year, and how they can find that list and that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. You can go to the CWD section of the agency website, that same list that has all the sampling locations. That'll tell you processors and taxidermists that we specifically work with, which is most of the folks in the region. And also, if if a hunter goes to check in their animal, if they're going through the check-in process on the app, if they select a Unit CWD county, it's going to ask them a question. Do you wish to have your animal sampled? If they answer yes, then it's going to bring up a drop-down box. If nothing else, you can see the processors and taxidermists that are working with us in that list. So that gives you another avenue to kind of see where you might go to have your animal tested.
Great. All right. We touched on this last time, the last live session, but the Wolf River Wildlife Management Area, what's happened to that, Jeremy, and is it still in operation? Where we were putting carcasses.
Sure. Yeah, the Wolf River site was operated just on a one-year basis as an emergency solution there. It was managed through best management practices with our partners at TDEC, and it was closed after the season. It was permanently closed, and so that is not operational anymore. This year, we do have another location for carcass management. It's located in Chickasaw State Forest in Hardeman County, and that will be, that's the same kind of partnership with TDEC and managing that the best way, the most responsible way possible. So.
Perfect. I know there's some questions coming in online, and we appreciate those. Some of these aren't related specifically to CWD, so we'll try to answer those in the comments. I noticed that some have already been answered, but we'll keep moving on with some of the questions that came in before, and if there's any more related to CWD, please feel free to throw them in the comments. How will carcasses be managed this year and in the future, Jeremy? I know there's some things going on as far as an incinerator and other things like that. So can you touch on some of that?
Yeah, so TWRA uses, our field staff, we actually use portable incinerators to handle disposal of, like when hunters leave their head for sampling, we dispose of those responsibly through a portable incinerator. And like I touched on earlier, we do have a carcass management site for processors, taxidermists, and it's open to the public if they need it. That's located at Chickasaw State Forest. And there's plans for a large scale incinerator that will be a more permanent solution, and that'll be located should be located in Fayette County in the future. So that project is kind of ongoing, and so hopefully it will be available soon.
Jeremy, what are the hours on that?
Oh, sorry. Yes, the hours on the Carcass management site will be Mondays and Thursdays from 10 to 2, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So.
Great. I know there's concerned hunters across the state, wanting to know if they can have their deer tested. Dan, are we testing elsewhere in the state? Are we offering that for other parts of the state outside of Unit CWD?
Yep, as I mentioned before, the way our surveillance is actually set up is it's at the county level. We have quotas for each county, and so each region has partnered with taxidermists and processors to kind of get those samples. There are freezer locations throughout the state. There's only about one per region, though, at this point in time, outside of Region 1. But on opening weekend of muzzleloader and rifle season, we will be at taxidermists and processors doing check stations. And if you want your deer tested, your other option, if you can't make it and you're not hunting on those weekends or you're hunting some other time, is to get in touch with your regional office and try and make arrangements to get your animal sampled.
All right. I tell you what, let's jump to one question here online. I think this is a good one, and I'll kind of throw it out for anyone who wants to. Why is TWRA not pushing for a full statewide ban on supplemental feeding of deer throughout the state? I know we have some feeding restrictions inside Unit CWD, but anyone would like to take that one?
That's a good question. I think what I would say is, if I would encourage folks to avoid feeding and congregating animals anywhere in the state, because I think if that feeding can contribute to spread of disease if it should exist in that area. So I would encourage folks that are concerned in that way to not feed in other parts of the state.
Cool. All right.
I'll just add to that. It's a tricky balance because people love to feed deer and people love to see deer. And so we are, the ban is instituted in the place where it can do the most good. And in areas where CWD has not been found, we haven't instituted that ban, but because it is such a popular activity and it's a hard thing to balance.
All right. Thank you, guys. We touched on this last time as well, but Dan, if you'd like to take this one, and maybe you can elaborate on it a little bit since the August hunt. But how many deer were killed in the August hunt? Did adding guns make a difference, and how many tested positive? And can you elaborate maybe on how the season's going so far outside of that hunt?
Okay, yeah. For the in Unit CWD specifically, where we changed some of the regs to encourage folks to be able to harvest more, or make it easier for folks to harvest more animals, we were up. Last year we harvested around 60 animals, and this year there's 164 animals harvested in Unit CWD. So while that was a drastic increase in the numbers of animals harvested, it wasn't necessarily biologically significant because of the area it's spread out over, but it was a good amount more that was harvested, which is always good because we one of the key things, and I'll go off on a tangent if we got some time here.
Sure.
For doing those activities early on like that in disease management is before those bucks are into full rut mode and they're out moving about on the landscape, it's better to remove them then before they've had if they are positive, had the chance to interact with deer that might not be positive. So it's always good to try and get those animals off the landscape early on in the season versus later on whenever they're actually heavily in rut. In terms of the numbers, we got around 84 sampled, I believe, from the unit CWD. So out of that 164, about 84 were actually sampled, which is a pretty good number. And then there was, I believe, 8 or 9 positives. All of those were in Fayette and Hardeman counties. At this point in time, with our sampling, there have not been any new positives in areas that we haven't already seen the disease, but it's really early in the season. And so as we get more and people are out in the field more with muzzleloader and rifle, we might see that start to change. But at this point in time, it's kind of plugging along like it was last year at this point in time. And it really is kind of too early to tell any changes in prevalence or anything like that, just based on the number of samples that we've gotten from the areas that we've been doing our sampling.
Thanks, Dan. There was a follow-up to that last question on the feeding. If you don't mind taking this one, someone take this one. By not banning supplemental feeding throughout the state, isn't TWRA being reactive instead of proactive? Would someone like to touch on that? Will being reactive ever get TWRA in front of the disease spread? Put you on the spot. Stephanie, I think your mic's not working. Check your mic. We'll let Jeremy take it. Yeah, go ahead.
So, I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future as far as regulations. I can't answer that. The best we can do is encourage folks not to feed if that's a concern, and I can't speak to future regulations though right at this point.
Sorry about that. I was talking and I had my microphone muted.
That's okay. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say that we are being proactive in that we have a really robust, rigorous surveillance system throughout the state so that we are ahead of the curve on finding out where the disease is. We can encourage people that there are many diseases that are spread in concentrated areas, and so we encourage people not to feed deer. But in terms of regulations and in terms of preventing CWD, the robust surveillance program that we have going right now is the best way to stay in front of the disease. And then we can implement the regulations that really are pretty unpopular when it's appropriate and necessary.
All right, thank you.
I'll try to unmute before I start talking next time rather than just talking into dead air.
That's all right. All right. Dan, how are the other seasons going? Has CWD expanded into new areas? And I believe that answer is no, but can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest answer is no. Not from the samples that we've collected at this point in time, it has not expanded. But again, we're really only into archery season. We've got muzzleloader and rifle in unit CWD opening up here. And once we get into that, we're going to start getting more samples and from a broader area, as well as samples from a broader group of animals. We'll be getting both sexes more often. And so if things are going to change, we're probably going to pick up that change during those seasons. We have in the off season also, when hunting season isn't around, we have been doing targeted surveillance. We do have our new, and we encourage people to go and use this as a tool for them, online sick deer reporting system. And so that's kind of what we've been using as a clearinghouse for getting reports of animals that may fit the bill for needing CWD testing. And that's available statewide. When people do go and fill that in online, we may not be able to get to every single animal. We use a set of criteria as to determine whether or not it's a high likelihood that it might be CWD. And based on that is how we kind of determine whether or not we'll sample it. But it also gives us a good idea of what's going on elsewhere in the state. We might have a hemorrhagic disease outbreak occurring, and we can pick up on it by people reporting those animals. And again, that's on the website also. And so we are doing surveillance year round. Just to kind of touch on just in surveillance in general, I guess, while I'm kind of rambling about it. When you see our reports, we're reporting from July 1 to June 30. That's our sampling period. Stephanie touched on our robust sampling scheme. We are using a weight-based sampling scheme. It is set at the county level, so every county has a quota that has to be met. And it's based on the combination of getting different ages and sexes of deer. And the shortest version is it's a risk-based assessment based on deer densities, the proximity of that county to other positives in the wild, practices of taxidermists and processors in the area, and all kinds of different factors have been factored into that. We've done 2 full cycles with that new sampling scheme. It was instituted in 2018, just prior to our detection. In both of those years, we've met and actually exceeded our sampling goals for every county in the state. And so we've got 2 full years of data, and the picture just gets to be stronger and stronger every year we repeat that system. And so, when we get this year's data, we're going to have even better a picture than we did last year with what's going on statewide. So.
And this kind of expands on the same kind of idea, but are there new strategies? Are we looking at new strategies to employ when managing CWD? Stephanie, you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, we have 2 new programs coming up after this hunting season. Right after the hunting seasons conclude in January, we will begin a new annual monitoring program to measure deer densities, both in the core area of the CWD affected area and also in the 4 spark areas at the north and east leading edges of the CWD affected areas. We'll be measuring densities annually just after hunting season, and that will allow us to monitor changes in the population size and also impacts from our management activities and also changes in CWD prevalence. Once those density measurements are completed in mid-January, we'll be working collaboratively with willing landowners to reduce deer densities in those spark areas on the east and north leading edges of the CWD affected areas. We're contracting with Wildlife Services to selectively remove deer in those recently affected areas. So a new targeted removal program. So both of those are new management strategies. Will be starting up in January, just after the season's end this year.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll go to a question coming in online. This is from Brian. I am in Mississippi, and we are not allowed to take anything of the deer except the meat over county lines. Does Tennessee have a dump spot for the scrape bones and guts?
I'll take that one.
Okay.
So that's a good question. We don't have specific dump sites, in the counties, but what I would encourage folks to do is, if you harvest an animal and you debone it, you have a couple of options. If you have the ability to bury the remains, that's a good option. If your household trash ultimately goes to a landfill, I would suggest double bag and put it in with your household trash. Otherwise, if you leave those remains on the property where you harvested the animal, that's also an acceptable practice, because if CWD exists there, you're not making it worse, and you're definitely not taking it to an area maybe where it potentially doesn't exist. And then of course we do have the carcass management site, which is open to the public on those 2 days from 10 to 2 if folks need to use that.
Just want to point out, since this person who's asking the question was in Mississippi, the option of bagging it and throwing it away in your household trash probably isn't going to be an option for you, because you'll probably be in violation of Mississippi's laws if you are bringing stuff across the Mississippi border from Tennessee.
Awesome. Good catch on that. Yeah. So know your transport rules. We touched on those in the beginning. CWDandTennessee.com for Tennessee transport rules, but also check your surrounding states to make sure you're not in violation. Another question for Stephanie. What are the goals of the targeted removal program? Can you touch on that, please?
So the targeted removal program is something we'll be implementing just this winter, beginning in mid-January after the hunting season's end. And it's been an effective strategy in several Midwestern states, and it's really considered to be a best management practice for managing CWD in newly affected areas. We'll be contracting with Wildlife Services on properties where we have landowner permission. We will only be going onto properties where we have permission with landowners. It's a collaborative effort with landowners, and we'll be working with willing landowners. We'll be selectively removing deer in those areas of very low prevalence that are recently affected and reducing densities. That will serve to reduce the prevalence and also minimize the spread of the disease to new areas. And I just want to reinforce that we will be only working in areas where we have permission, and we're working very closely with the landowners. And I also want to remind everybody that we will be monitoring deer densities before we do the targeted removal. And that will know the population, that will let us know the population level impacts of the targeted removals, and also we'll be able to document the impacts over time and the impacts on prevalence from the targeted removal. So targeted removal is really the best way to manage the disease in those newly affected areas. And that's the priority, right, in that area, is to manage the disease. And so we need to stop the disease in its tracks, stop it from spreading into new areas, and this is the best way to do it.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. If there's more questions online, feel free to put them in the comments. I have one more question that had come in before we had prepared for today. It's kind of out of order, but it's okay. Stephanie, this will be for you. Why is it important to harvest does in the unit CWD?
So just like we were talking about earlier about how high densities of deer contribute to disease spread, does can contribute to disease spread. And so by harvesting does, hunters can help decrease the density of deer in an area. It helps us to manage the population at lower levels. Does also contribute to the persistence of the disease within a population and also to the spread. Bucks are not the only ones that disperse. Even though young bucks may disperse longer distances, does also contribute to dispersal. Ultimately, hunters are our best partners in CWD management, and maintaining harvest of bucks and does is the best way to manage the disease. Doe harvest dropped off dramatically in unit CWD last year, and so we're really encouraging everybody to continue to harvest your limit of bucks and does, and continue to participate in CWD management. We rely on hunters. You're our best partners in managing the disease.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah.
Hey, Jason.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, one of the things we haven't touched on for the core area, we do have a new program that was actually started last spring, and I don't believe many people have used it, but it's and I'll let Jeremy speak a little more to it, but it's through our deer depredation program. We've got permits available as disease management permits within Fayette and Hardeman County and within 3 miles of a known positive in the peripheral counties. And I'll let Jeremy talk a little more about that. So that's kind of a regional effort.
Yeah, I'd encourage folks that are interested to seek out, either contact us at the regional office, maybe talk to your county wildlife officer if you want more information. But yeah, Dan's right. We have a new CWD management permit that will allow landowners to take additional deer from their properties outside of deer season. And that's just another tool that we have in partnership with landowners to reduce the population. So.
Awesome. Good information. A couple of things I'd like to do is just encourage encourage hunters to harvest your limit, get out there and enjoy great outdoors. Remember, CWD in Tennessee, all the things we've been talking about, plus more resources are there for CWD, Unit CWD. The transport graphs are there. A lot of good information at cwdintennessee.com. If you want to make sure you get your testing results, make sure you got your correct email address in your account at gooutdoorstennessee.com, and you can stay informed by signing up for updates at the website cwdintennessee.com. So we'll keep you up to date with emails and things like that, but make sure your email is correct so you can get those testing results. And don't forget the gun season opens up early this year for Unit CWD. And then this weekend is the youth hunt. So you will have 8 weeks to hunt with a gun starting on November 7th. So don't be out there this weekend. That's the young sportsman hunt. So join the fight, harvest more deer. And don't forget to tag before you drag. You can use the app to do that, or you can also use the paper tag that you can download at gooutdoorstennessee.com. But the app is real easy, and you can tag your deer with or without cell service. So that's a cool feature. But remember to tag before you drag. Guys, is there anything else? Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I just wanted to mention one thing. As far as the November 7th and November 21st check stations throughout the state. So that's where the regional deer biologists, and staff rely on those check stations for biological information throughout the state. That's how we keep track of a lot of things about our deer harvest. That's also really important for us to reach our sampling goals for the other counties as part of that surveillance system that we've discussed earlier. So I would encourage people, if you live outside of CWD, if you live in Middle Tennessee or East Tennessee, come see us on November 7th and November 21st. Let us take measurements on your antlers, and collect a CWD sample if you're willing. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, one other thing I was going to add, Jason, as what we've mentioned a few times, make sure your email is up to date within the TWA system. But we will be notifying multiple ways. There will be posted online. If you go to the website, if you know your confirmation number, you can see the current status of your animal, as well as if you log into your online account and check next to next to your confirmation number, it should update it there. But we will be pushing out notifications via email also. So there's multiple ways that people will be notified. And if for some reason somebody doesn't have an email address and they're not online and all other kind of stuff, they're going to get it in the mail. And anybody who has a positive test will be getting contacted by a TWA employee just because we want to confirm location and all the information that we have and make sure it's just completely accurate according to what was reported from the field all the way up. So
great. Thank you, Dan, for that. Thank you guys, all of you guys, for jumping in today and being part of this panel and answering these questions for everybody. One more came in. Can we watch the entirety? Yes, you can. You can watch this. This whole broadcast will be archived in our feed, so you can tune in at any time and watch it. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Dan. And thank you, the public, for tuning in and watching. If you've got more questions, throw them in the comments, and we'll try to get those answered in the comments for you. So go out, have fun, happy hunting, and we'll see you next time.